We are the Gujarat Technological University. Since its inception over a decade ago, GTU has been empowering young and curating minds to realize their true potential. Over 4 lakh inspired students are enrolled with one of the premier academic universities in India. With more than 450 affiliated colleges in its fold operating across 5 zones of the state, GTU, the International Innovative University, your place to move forward.
Good morning, students. Let us study functions in C. In my first presentation on functions, I have covered these topics. Now, in this lecture, we will study different categories of function and a very important concept in functions, that is recursion. Now, we divide the function into 5 different categories depending upon the argument and return type. They are functions with no arguments and no return value. Second category, the functions with arguments and no return value. Category third, function with arguments and 1 return value. Fourth, function with no arguments and a return value. And finally, the last category, the functions returning multiple values. Let us now see each of them. The first category, functions with no arguments and no return value. Right? So user-defined functions will not have any arguments. This means they will not receive any data from calling function. Right? Look at this function call. There are no arguments, no actual arguments which are being passed. So nothing is passed from this main, that is your calling function, to the called function, that is add. Right? So this is the function declaration I have written here in the yellow box. Add function. We have already seen this example, right, in my first lecture on functions. Clear? So I have taken the same example. This add function is going to add 3 numbers and it will display the result. Right? Now, since in this category we have no return value, the function is not going to return anything, right? So we are not writing return here. That means the function will print the value of sum within that particular function only, right? So there is no output to the main, right? So this function definition says we are declaring 3 variables a, b, c and sum as 0, right? Then we are taking the values of these 3 numbers, calculating the sum and then displaying the result. So all these things are done within a function add, right? In the main, we have included the function call with no arguments, no actual arguments, right? And before main, we have added void add semicolon. This is your function prototype, right? So in whole, we have seen in this particular category, there is no transfer of data between calling and called function, right? So there is no return of the value. So you can see here we have written the return type as void. This is a keyword in C language, right? This signifies there is no return value. Clear? Another important thing, the function is taking the values from the terminal or user, right? ABC values are not given from the main, right? Add itself is taking these values, right? Let's move on to the second category, that is function with arguments and no return value. So there are arguments, that means some data is being transferred from main to the called function, that is add, right? So what we are passing? We are passing the actual arguments, that is the value of A, B, C, whose sum is to be calculated, the three numbers, right? Now, look at the code here. Your function prototype or the function declaration, right? Then the main, you are declaring three variables x, y, z, taking the value of these three variables from the user and then passing these values to add, right? This is your function call. Name of the function, within the bracket I am passing the actual arguments. This is your call by value. Remember, if we are passing just the name of the variables, that means the value of these variables will be copied, right? So the value of x will be copied into A, right? The value of y will be copied into B and the value of z will be copied into C. So there is one-to-one correspondence between your actual arguments and the formal parameters, right? This is very important. These actual and formal arguments must match in number, type and order, right? In case the actual arguments are more than formal arguments, then the extra arguments will be discarded. But if your actual arguments are less than the formal arguments, then the unmatched formal arguments are initialized to some garbage value. This means in case instead of passing x, y and z, I am just passing x and y, right? And here we need three variables, the value of three variables. So what will happen? X value will be copied into A, the value of Y will be copied into B, and C will be assigned some garbage value, right? Clear? So in this second category, we have arguments, but the function is not returning anything, right? So there is no need to write the return directly. This closing braces will indicate the termination of the function add, and the control will be transferred back to the calling function, that is main. Clear? The category 3, we have functions with arguments and a return value, right? Now we have both things. So the function definition will look like this. You have int, that is a return type. Now the function is returning some value, the name of the function and the formal parameters, right? Within the function, there is no need to take the values of A, B and C as they are passed from the main, right? And then there is no need to display the value of the sum of these three variables. Why? Because we need to return the value now. We have written a keyword return here, and then what we are returning the sum of these three values, and then this is returned and the value is stored in the result variable within the main, right? So your function call will look like this. Add, within the braces I have included the actual parameters x, y, z, right? The value of these will be copied into the formal parameters A, B and C, right? And then the value of sum will be copied into result, right? So your main will look like, first you are declaring three variables, right? Taking these values of these three variables from the user using scanf function and then passing these values into the function as actual arguments, right? Finally, the value the function is returning is stored in result, which is being displayed on the screen. Now you can see the function prototype we have included here. Return type, name of the function and the data type and the number of parameters. Right? Now, in this particular case, there is a two-way data communication between the calling and the called function. Right? Such functions are normally called as a black box. They are the independent and self-contained block. Right? They received a predefined form of input and output a desired value. Clear? The category 4 is the function with no arguments and returning a value, right? So your function definition will look like, since it is not having any argument, so this will be parameter list will be empty, returning a value. So let's say it is returning a integer value. So I'm writing here int, right, as a return type, and then name of the function. Within the body of the function, we need to declare three variables, take their values from the terminal, that is user, right? And then you are calculating the sum, and the value of sum is returned to the calling function, that is main, right? This value is stored in result, and then we are displaying the value. Understood the difference? When you are having an argument, that means you are having a parameter list. Then there is no need to take these values from the user within the function add. This part is being done in the main, right? In case there is no arguments, then the function add is not receiving any value from any data from the main, right? So within the add, we have to take the values of these three variables whose sum is to be found. Clear? A simple example of this category is getChar function, right? GetChar has no parameters but return an integer type data that represents a character. Clear? The fifth category is the function that returns multiple value, right? This is possible only with the help of your pointers, right? So you must have an address operator and indirection operator. Clear? So I have taken a simple example here. Just look at this first. This is the function declaration or a function prototype, right? Int, that means the function is returning a value. It should be a void, right? Just correct this. By mistake, it is written int. You have to make this void, right? Now I'm coming to this point also, why we are writing it void, not the int. Although we are saying that the function is returning multiple values, right? So how this is possible? Let's look at the function now. So this comprises of void and then the name of the function. The function I have taken is math operation, right? Math op. And then it has a 4 parameters, num1, num2 and 2 pointers, s and d. Right? Now, within the main, we are declaring two variables x and y. X is assigned a value 20, y is assigned a value 10, and then s and d are also declared of type int. Now you are calling a function and these parameters are being passed. Now the value of x and y are passed and the address of s and d are passed. Right? So these two comprises of call by reference. Right? When we have discussed the call by reference and call by value, I have told you what is the difference between passing an address or passing a value of a variable, right? So in my first lecture on functions, this thing has been made clear, right? So we are passing the address of s and d and values of x and y. Now in this function math op, right? num1 will receive the value 20, num2 is going to receive the value 10, right? And pointer sum will point to now address of S, and then difference will point to the address of D, right? So what you are doing, you are adding the two numbers 20 plus 10, 30, and then storing the result where at the value at the address of S, right? So where ampersand S, your address of S is there, at that particular value you are storing the sum. So within this function method, what we are doing, we are changing the value of S and D, right? Not sum and difference. Clear? So this 30 will be stored in S and the difference, that is 10, will be stored in D. Since directly we are manipulating the variable S and D, so there is no need to return these values again, right? The changes are being done in S and D only. S and D are the variables in the main, right? Now when you are going to display this value S and D, what you will get? 30 and difference is equal to 10, right? So this is only achieved through the pointers. The most important concept in function, that is recursion. Reoccur, that means a function that call itself again and again is recursive function, right? Just look at this example. Now you have a function 1 here, and within a function 1, what I am doing, I am calling again the same function, right? So this is your recursion. This function is called, function 1 is called a recursive function. Now what will happen? The function 1 will start its execution. Within that, another function of the same name, that is the function 1. The same function will be called again and again. Now this will go into an infinite loop. How to stop this? You must include the exit condition. So this is a very important point. Just remember, your recursive function should have an exit condition, right? When you have supposed to call this function and when you are not supposed to call this function and exit this, right? Let's see the example. I need to calculate the factorial of a number. Let's say n, right? Now what we have done in this recursive function, we have declared one variable fact, right? And then we are calculating the factorial using this particular statement. What it says fact is equal to n multiplied by factorial n minus 1. Now the name of my function is factorial. Within this body of the function, I am again calling this function. So this is a case of recursion, right? Now how to calculate the factorial? Let's say I have to calculate the factorial of 3, right? 3 factorial is equivalent to 3 multiplied by 2 factorial, right? Now 2 factorial will be equivalent to 2 multiplied by 1 factorial, right? And we all know that 1 factorial is 1. There is no need for any calculation in this particular step, right? So this will be my terminating condition. If n is equal to 1, return now, right? No need to call the function factorial again, just return the value 1. That means if n is 1, I have to calculate, I am calculating 1 factorial, then 1 will be directly returned, right? If I am calculating 2 factorial, right, then what is going to return? First, one time this statement will be executed, that is fact is equal to 2 multiplied by factorial 1. Again this function will be called, and then in this particular case n is 1, so it is going to return 1. So your previous call will get the value 1 here. So you can calculate the fact is equal to 2 multiplied by 1, that is 2, and then that will be returned. Understood? Now look at this diagram. Now let us say I have to calculate 3 factorial. How this is going to work? Since n is not 1, right? So it will move on to the else part, and what we will get? The fact is equal to 3 multiplied by factorial 2. So this function, the execution of the function will remain suspended till we get the value of factorial 2, right? This is the second time we are calling the factorial, right? Now factorial 2 will be equivalent to, again n is not 1, right? So again it will move on to this part. So I will get the fact is equal to 2 multiplied by factorial 1. Again this execution cannot be completed until we get the value of factorial 1. So function will be called again, right? And in this time n is 1, yes, so the function will return 1, right? No further call to factorial. Clear? So the value of 1 will be returned to this step. So I can calculate the fact is equal to 2 multiplied by 1, that is 2. Right? Now this value will be given to the second function call, right? Where we have written the fact is equal to 3 multiplied by factorial 2. Now we have the value of factorial 2 as 2, right? So we will get 3 multiplied by 2. So factorial of a number will be, the fact will be equivalent to 6. Understood? This is how a recursion occurs. So these are certain advantages and disadvantages of recursion. Just go through them, right? And finally, the most commonly asked questions in the exam, right? So in this presentation, I have answered all these questions, right? So I request all the students to go through this presentation carefully, and you will get the answers of these questions. These are the references I have used. So, wishing you all a very happy learning. Thank you.